Okay.
Looks like we're live.
Hi, everybody. Hello.
Hey. So
Welcome,
this is
welcome.
Lauren. I'm really excited to have our guest today, Deborah Epstein. I know her from, I was in a creativity and consciousness summit that you created, which was really amazing. So I love talking to you. So I couldn't wait for you to talk to you again. So let us tell us or tell the world a little bit about yourself, who you are, and what's your visions and passions.
Yeah, so I'm a visionary artist and also a healer. I practice in the shamanic arts, and I do body work and energy work. And I work supporting women to create their creative visions and step into their power and do what they love to do in the world. So that's kind of what I do. And yeah, so right now we're sitting in my medicine lodge, which I call the Cosmic Dreaming Lodge, and I work with guides. And so what I've been doing, my creative project that I've been working on probably for, going on a year now, has been painting all of the guides that I interact with. So yeah, kind of bringing in the energy of them through my artwork.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Last conversation, Lisa and I were talking to Sharon Burton of Spark Your Creative Coaching, and she mentioned this. She just was we were just talking, and she started talking about like asking yourself, the world is hurting, so what can I do? Like, what's something that I can do in terms of being creative, right, to bring more peace and joy to the world? And just considering the work that you do, we thought it was such a great question to ask you and to just kind of dive deep into today. So like, what can we do as a society to, through creativity to bring more peace and joy? And then like, what can people do as individuals?
Yeah, well, I believe this. I believe it starts with us as individuals, and I think that too. There's a lot of guilt and shame around that. When you're taking care of yourself first, I want to serve the world, right? I want to serve the world. I want to make the world a better place. But the world is built up of individuals, right? And we all have the capability to take care of ourselves, to bring in more joy and more love and more light. And if we can tap into that and work on that here, then it's like a virus that infects others. Speaking of virus, like making it a virus like of love versus like sickness, illness, kind of spin it in the other direction. And I think it gets overwhelming because there is so much going on in the world that we want to change, that we'd like to see different, but we're part of that macrocosm. So how is it affecting us on this level, right here in your body, in your cells, in your energy? And so, yeah, that's kind of what I think about that is like really like, it's not a selfish thing. Right. It's an imperative thing that we start to come here and we start to embody that change that we want to see in the world.
I love the metaphor you use about the virus, because we think, right, getting over our COVID right now, we're all pretty traumatized.
Yeah.
You can recontextualize it. A virus is a good thing if it's about peace and joy and creativity and more a heart-centered way of being.
Yeah, it is funny that just kind of popped out, and because what it was coming through me is like thinking about how things go viral on the internet, and that's a good thing, right? We want like whatever we're like this podcast, we want it to go viral, so more people see it, and so like why couldn't the same thing be true of like creating peace and joy and love? And what I love about art and how going through that channel to create is that art really changes our perception. It changes our wiring. It changes our thinking. It changes how we see the world. And it also is a great tool for introspection and going in and, allowing us to create the story or metaphor for how we're feeling when it's kind of beyond words, because we have these words like overwhelm, and we have these words, like, and that's, I think, what's happening right now. A lot of people are feeling really overwhelmed. And what do we do when we get overwhelmed? I think a great majority of us kind of shrink back, and it's really interesting too, because like what I'm noticing out there is that we just want to go back. We just want to go back, but we can't go back because too much has happened. We've learned too much. And so you can't go back. Right. Mm-hmm. But what can we do going forward? So we want to start thinking forward. Right. And art is a great vehicle for that. Expression is a great vehicle for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what would you say to someone who is admittedly feeling overwhelmed? And they want to do what you're suggesting, which is sort of create from the personal in order to improve the universal, right? And I definitely agree with that. I do believe that when the more personal you become, especially as like an artist, funny enough, the more universal your message becomes. It's like a weird juxtaposition, but I do think that happens. But what if someone is like today is listening to this and they're like, oh my gosh, you're so right. I feel so overwhelmed, but I'm so overwhelmed that I don't even know where to begin to help my own heart in order to spread that viral message of peace and joy.
Yeah. So in my training, I'm a myofascial release therapist, and one of it's like, I want to say tenets or principles of that, doing that kind of work, is you meet everything where it is. You don't try to fix it. You don't try to change it. And then there's this other great phrase, go with the direction of ease. So when you meet resistance with resistance, you just get this kind of staticky thing, right? Nothing really changes and you're exhausting yourself, right? So if you're going to meet your overwhelm with trying to fix it or change it or blow it up or, whatever, it's going to stay stuck. And overwhelm is like anything else. It's a sign or a symptom of something. So just meeting the overwhelm, admitting I'm overwhelmed. Stop trying to push it away. Like, let yourself be overwhelmed. And it's funny, even as I'm saying that, because I feel the overwhelm too, I'm getting ready for a trip. I've got lots of stuff going, so I could easily allow that overwhelm to overtake me. And so it's just really about being honest with, oh my God, I am overwhelmed. I'm going to sit and just feel the overwhelm. I'm going to take a 5-minute overwhelm break. And it's interesting because when you just give it the space, it disperses the energy.
Yeah.
I stop fighting it. It's like real subtle too, because it's not like I'm overtly trying to like stop it from happening. It's just something I'm feeling, and it's almost like the result for me is kind of like running around with like a chicken with its head cut off, right? Yeah. Maybe not that dramatic, but like there's a little fire in there, So I think like if I can give myself like a time out, and just feel it. And then, it's funny, I've been trying to get to my art table all day and I'm packing some stuff up, and it's really calling me because that's another strategy for me to kind of meet my overwhelm, is to just feel the energy of it and let it come through in a drawing, a scribble, a doodle, or whatever. It's so funny because one of the things I say, it's like, we're not making art, it's expression. Yeah. And so we don't need it to be pretty. You don't have to have it finished. And, it's just like, let it out in a way that you can see it on the page. You can see what that feels like. And it's not about it being wrong or bad or pretty or ugly. It's just, it is what it is,
I love that. I love a couple things that we're talking about. This idea of like, I think a lot of people do think that making art is a selfish act, and even self-care is a selfish act. How do we change that perception? Because I've been told that, oh, you're an artist, you're selfish. You know what I mean? That's kind of like that quick reaction, right? So what do you say to those folks that think it's selfish, like straight straight out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's funny because like what that makes me think of is when I was in art school and one of my teachers talking about how it's a self-indulgent. It's self-indulgent. And then if you're going to do this was a portrait class too. Like, so it's like, that's the highest form of self-indulgence. Here you are being self-indulgent and just looking at yourself, right? And painting yourself.
Yeah, yeah.
And it is true that that is in our culture, isn't it? You know, and it's you know, how we come to art. It's like hangs on a wall, it hangs in a museum, it's pristine, it's not for the every person.
Right.
And that's actually like, it's just what I work in. It's like we need to get beyond like, well, what do you call selfish, you know?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that, yeah, I think that you have to do with selfish what you do with a lot of words, which is kind of create a spectrum of the definition that, because you inherently kind of have to be selfish because you won't survive. Like,
Yeah.
you literally have to take care of yourself or you will perish. And so we're just taking that to another step. We're not just talking about eating right and drinking water and having some shelter. We're talking about the mental part of that selfishness, right? If you're going to use the word selfish. And I would argue that in terms of the degrees of selfish that we're asking people to be, right? To be selfish in order to be better. And so if that's what we're asking for, and that's kind of funny because is that really selfish? But what that you do is not selfish if it's self-serving. Because even like I volunteer and it's the greatest feeling in the world. And I do it because it makes me feel good. So is that selfish? Sure. I mean, it's selfish, but it's also kind of awesome. And you know, so it's kind of how you look at it. And I guess you would have to explain to someone like what we mean by being selfish. We don't mean like take from other people,
right,
in order to make yourself better. We mean the complete opposite, actually. Make yourself better in order to serve everybody else, right?
Yeah, because you can't serve from an empty cup, right? There's nothing there, you know? And then it's really interesting because like when I think of selfish, I think of like holding back, you know? And not sharing, right? Yourself or your gifts with the world, hiding is kind of it. And it's so funny because like that's been kind of my thing lately. I've been really looking at like, where am I hiding? You know, where am I playing small? Because it's always, you know, we have these patterns in our life and, you know, we're not above them, right? Just because we're doing what we're doing, we just learned how to work with them, right? Or not to like let them get in our way. And but they still come up, you know, they still come up all the time. And so it's like, like where, you know, can I go a little deeper into that? And so like that's kind of been on my mind, and like where selfishness and playing small kind of meet, you know, when you're not living into your full potential or the fullest expression of who you are, you know, you're holding back on all of us, you know.
Totally.
And this is about sharing your light, and that's not selfish, and it's not what's the word I'm thinking of, it's not egoic, you know, because we all have a light, you know. And if we're going to make the world a better place, we want to turn our lights on, right? Make it brighter, make it sunnier, make it happy, right? Yeah. And I really feel like it's so funny because I have places that I resist in my life too, you know, like, and it's funny, just like today, like trying to get to the art table, you know, because I'm off a little bit of my normal routine. I'm missing it. I want to make myself get back there. But, you know, there's other things I need to put first. So it is it's an interesting thing because I've got it prioritized in my life. And today's a day that I didn't follow my priorities in that way. And so I think that is for women, I think that's a big issue, and then the selfishness talk comes in because I have my kids and I have my husband and I have my job, I've got to go there first. But I had to work that one out too. I worked full time at a clinic here in Sedona. It's why I moved out to Sedona. And I went from having my own private practice where I had everything all figured out and I, had my art, working with my body work practice and all that kind of stuff. And it was really beautiful. And when I moved here, it just threw everything kind of into chaos a little bit because I was totally out of my element. There was a lot to get used to. And so everything of my routine kind of got obliterated. We were in a different house, we were renting, all that kind of stuff. And so when I finally settled in, I started realizing I needed to get my art fix. I needed to have that time by myself. Didn't matter what I was doing, right?
Yeah.
I just needed that time. So I started getting myself up a half hour earlier so I could come down to the studio and just paint or do whatever. I made so much amazing work in that time, just doing like a half hour. I'd start a piece and then just come back to it every day. And it's like I let go of caring like of finished product. It was like what I noticed opening up for me in my day was I had way more energy. I had way more creativity when I was working with patients, like coming to solutions with people, seeing like just my whatever patterns I was working with or drawing with or colors would be in my mind. And so I was kind of seeing the world through that, those patterns and shapes and all that kind of stuff. So it just like, to me, it's like creativity begets creativity, you just stay in the flow of that. So
that's really good information for people who want to start, like how do they get an art fix? Like how do you get to that place where you're like, okay, I'm going to wake up at 5:30 because I need this. And I know that this is good for me. Like Lauren was talking about, this is healthy, healthy water, healthy food. This is positive energy. This is peace. So how do you tell that person? Because, this is all about taking an art break. We're encouraging people because we believe that it makes people better. So how do you get the art fix? I mean, we kind of know it, but, maybe share it with us.
How did, right. So the question I'm coming to is like, because you're talking about like an art high, like it's like a runner's high, right?
Yeah.
And it takes to get a runner's high, right? That you got to run for 6 weeks, man, before you start feeling that high, and then you never ever want to stop, right? Like how long, and this is just, I'm just throwing this out there, how long do you think someone needs to make art before they get that art high where they realize, oh my gosh, I can't operate without this now, or I'll notice a difference when I don't, like you are today, right? You're noticing a difference in your life because you're missing that sort of dopamine or endorphin you normally get, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just pondering that, like, how long do you think it takes someone to get there?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And from my own personal experience with like working with resistance, because that's what you're talking about. So like I used to ride my bike like tons. I don't anymore. I do other things, but there used to be this point, like about 5 minutes into my ride, I'd be like, oh,
Totally.
Oh, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? This sucks, but it's like, once you hit that sweet spot, right? And that's what you're talking about. Everything starts kicking in. I feel like that is like that too with making art. And there is another component to that, because we have that self-judgment piece. So if I'm already starting in a place of like, oh, like especially just starting, right? And like, what am I doing? I don't know anything about these materials, right? What if no one likes it? What if I don't like it? Like, oh, what am I doing? Because we have all these judgments and fear and all that kind of stuff. So I feel like there's an extra level of resistance on that. And that's kind of what I work with people with is like, just play, just like, when I don't teach technique, really, if I could call what I do teaching, or I think it's really guiding, let's just make a mess. let's just get it messy. Like, let's just throw some paint around and let it be that. If it's just a color, like, let it be a color. Enjoy the color. Like, what's your favorite color? You know, so it's like trying to find the fun parts of this so that you're not setting yourself up to fight for a half an hour, right?
Yeah, it feels like your suggestion is sort of like, because you have a daily practice, you have art materials and you're doing it and everything like that. And it's like, start with that and then take away all the things that sort of make you uncomfortable. And I'm talking about that person that doesn't have that art break routine yet. And down to the thing you can handle, where you can do that. Because I think that if you had a canvas and a paintbrush and paints, a good portion of the people we're trying to talk to right now would be like, I'm not going to even try that. And so, okay, so take the paintbrush away, take the paint away, take the canvas away. Let's put a piece of paper in front of you and your fingers or a cup of paint, right? And just dump it and then close your eyes and swoosh it. You know, like maybe we'd get 50% of the people that way. So I like that you just remove all the things and it's like taking all the layers and then you can build them back up as you get comfortable.
Yeah, it's like going back to kindergarten. It's like get in touch with the 5-year-old, you know. But even, I mean, there's resistance in that too. And what I'm thinking of is like Julia Cameron's Artist Way, and how, I mean, the biggest takeaway for me in that was the morning pages. And what if we could have something that was similar to that, you know, the art pages where you just had the journal and, you know, got crayons, like really get basic, right? And you're not allowed to make words.
Yeah.
And what if you could act it out in color? So it's so funny. I had this exercise that I did in a training program, and it was more with words and stuff. So you had like one basic story, but you told the story from like a victim place, a hero place, and it's the same story, you tell it. And then it got like really crazy. Now tell it in gibberish. So make up a language. And so like you're trying to get this, you know, so it's like how, you know, find ways of having fun with it. So if we could do like, get a journal, no lines on the paper, you know, just blank, and then crayons, and like, tell me your story, you know, what colors are you going to use to express that story? How are you feeling today? You know, are you feeling like brown? Are you feeling black? Are you feeling blue? Are you feeling green? You know, kind of getting in touch with that. I think that would be a great place to start, you know.
I like the idea of giving yourself permission to make a mess, because I think a lot of people don't want to get dirty. There's that other thing. That's a resistance also. Like, I don't know, you know, I'm going to get paint on my clothes or something. But really finding that space where you can make a mess. And then what I like that you said also is it's really about living your life almost like mythological, you know, because it's like you are a hero, you are a victim, you are all these spectrum things. And it's okay, like, to have that day of overwhelm, or, you know, they call it opening anxiety right now with COVID, where you don't know if you're supposed to wear a mask or what. And so it's almost like looking at your life like a story, like a journey, like a hero's journey.
Yeah, I like that. I like this idea of this journal idea you got going on, because like, what if you what if you did just have a piece of paper and crayons, and for 7 days you woke up and you covered the entire sheet of paper in the color that you're feeling that day. And that's right. And so you did that for 7 days, because I feel like that's pretty approachable. I feel like that's pretty approachable for most people, because there's no figure in there. There's no shape. There's no drawing. There's just a color, right? And can go back and flip over each piece of paper if you wanted to go further and really talk about, like, ask yourself, why last Monday did I pick the color red? Why last Tuesday did I color brown? And then really kind of dissect those feelings that you were feeling, you know. It would be awesome to just do that. Maybe that's an art break that someone can try, that really wants to get to that place of spreading peace and joy, but they just are resistant, or they're afraid, or they just have that art wound they haven't gotten past yet, right? They just can't. And I feel like that could be a first step for people, because, you know, that's where we are currently operating from, is that we really want to help folks who well, first of all, even those people that are like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
We want them to get the idea.
Yeah, but especially those people that are just like on the verge of like, oh yeah, we're so close, and I think of your ideas are really opening that up for them. Yeah.
It's really interesting because as I think back on my life too, it's I think what we're kind of bumping up against with art too is the that we have to feel, and we live in a culture that is really kind of shut down with feeling. And I when I was living back east, I always thought it was really funny because I'm like trying to make it out as an artist, and I'm like emotionally expressive artist, and like it's really hard to get people to look at it because it's like, oh, like that's making me feel something and I don't really like that. And then what do? I go, well, I'm really attracted to energy work and I'm really attracted to body work, and like, guess what, I have to deal with more feelings, and because a lot of what we have to own our own feelings, feel our own feelings. This is energy that needs to move, and it gets stuck in our bodies, gets stuck in our tissues, it gets stuck in our mind, and then it expresses as stuckness in the world. And like what we're doing is we're using art as the entry point or the doorway to just start to feel what has you stuck, express the stuck, express the overwhelm. Let yourself be in it. Yeah, it feels yucky, but once you feel the yuckiness, right, it changes, right? We know that it changes into something else. It's so alchemical, right? And it's it's like, you can hear, like, I'm excited about it because it's like, it keeps you going, it's always changing. We're always changing. And when we get stuck is when we're not allowing ourselves to feel. And it's art is really interesting because we want people to do that, right? We want people to make the art and to have these experiences because we know how much it opens us up. But that is the resistance around it all at the same time. And like, how long would it take? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen, and I know Lisa has, because she's shared this before. I've seen transformation within a couple of minutes when we've done art events, in terms of the resistance. And then honestly, it's peer pressure, like friends being like, come on, you can do it. And then they do it because of the peer pressure, but then you watch them, and then you watch what happens to the relationship between the people that just, that know each other. Then they know each other more deeply. And then you have people who don't know each other and who would never know each other, but for the fact that they sat next to each other and started making art. And it's amazing what you hear them talk about, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think, I definitely don't have an answer to that question that I asked, but I think that it could be a matter of minutes. And then for some people, it could be a lot longer. But I would argue that I'm probably still doing it myself. And I've been making art since I was 14 or so, on a legit, like, where I felt like I was doing this and I'm making art. But I was just talking to Lisa the other day. I didn't call myself an artist until 3 months before I got my master's, so it's a process, right? And it's still a process, and it always will be a process. And maybe that's the message that people need to hear, is that, maybe no artwork is ever done because it's the one artwork, and it's the work, right? It's the work.
Yeah. And that's an interesting point too, because like, that's a lot of the, we deal with that with ourselves. It's like we're product driven,
Oh, yeah.
And we know it's processed. It's all about the unfolding. And, I don't know, it's a very interesting conundrum, I think, because there's so much fear around art. And I think it's just how we were shut down, or how it was presented to us in school. You have the classroom artists, and so like only an elite few. And it's like the elite few, like, what do they have in common? Well, they're showing me something, and it's I used to go like, well, why do I want to try and kind of capture the reality exactly as I see it, like a camera can do that, and what would it look like going just through my experience of like a scene or whatever, and is that valid enough? And I think these questions like that as artists we ask ourselves when we're doing a piece or coming up with like a series of things that we want to do, like we kind of learned how to have those thought processes, right? But I don't think the average person gets that, because I think I'm like looking at the paintings behind you, Lisa, and I look at them and I go, oh, like if someone, I'm going to try and find the thing I can relate to in it. I'm looking for an object, and there's no object. So I don't know what to say about that. So there's fear just sometimes in looking at an abstraction of art, or an expression of art that's an abstract, So this is a very, very deep, very deep conversation.
I'm thinking, I forgot the quote. What it's really about, art speaks to our subconsciousness. You know what I mean? It's like, it's much more stronger than words. Mm-hmm. And so I think there is, how do I say this? That's the fear factor sometimes comes in because it is feeling. It is beyond words. And you're right. I can't say that there's, a mouse in there or something like that, right? I can't, I have to feel it. Right. And that's really what art is. It's communicating right with that subconscious. And you really can learn a lot about yourself because we're in the dark. Most of us are in the dark. So you're right. We turn on the light and we find peace. And as you turn on the light more and more and you go in,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but you turn on the light and you see it all, right? And that's the part that's where the resistance comes in, right? Because a lot of people aren't ready to see everything.
I was just thinking, that could be very scary.
Yeah, I mean, because it, sometimes it's right. It's almost like I just think of like the grief process, because I think a lot of people have probably been thinking about the grief process through COVID, because we all went through some sort of grieving process, whether or not people are willing to admit it for themselves, right? Mm-hmm. One of the main ones is denial, mm-hmm. And I think that I'm just thinking of denial in two ways, right? So it's like someone is in denial that they need art because, and that's based on fear. And they're like, oh, I don't need it. It doesn't do anything. And then at the same time, they're denying themselves so much because of it. And if only they knew. But I can understand why there's this huge gap, because it's very scary to get to know yourself sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Because in order to know your true self, you have to know all of you. Mm-hmm. And so you have to welcome all of you, and you have to, all that uncomfortable stuff that you have been pushing aside. That's the stuff that art will just show you right away.
Yeah.
And so it's funny, like whenever, as an artist, when you get like sort of a negative vibe from someone, and people would ask me like, how do you feel when people react to your work that way? I'm like, well, I just am happy they're feeling something, because that's telling me so much, and hopefully it's telling them something too, right? They're open to that. Because when you have like a nasty reaction to art, oh goodness, like you should probably spend some time figuring
unpack that one.
You're on the right track if you're eliciting feelings like that too, because you're opening something that needed to be opened, in that person. And it's really interesting, because what that makes me think of is one of the questions I ask people when I'm working with them too, is like, what if you were never told you were wrong?
Right.
What, because like when you're like, just think about like when you're a little kid and you're 3, 4, 5 years old, you're just kind of like in your own little space, you're in your own little dream world, you don't have all of this like awareness of the outer world really, so you're just kind of bopping along, having fun, and you run into an adult that like is not really happy with where you are, in life, for whatever reason, like, don't use my coffee for paint on the wall, whatever, and you're just thinking like, that's just the best thing ever. I'm staining mom's fabrics, but like you get yelled at for that, you get, and you get punished for that. You don't have like the wherewithal to really go like, oh, I'm not being punished for my expression.
Right.
I'm being punished because it really wasn't a good idea to ruin mom's fabrics, so you don't have that ability to think. And I think that we lose parts of our creative self in the shadows because of those instances, when we were made wrong, that's just kind of a real, like kind of a simple kind of example, but some of them get worse, like I've heard stories of, kids being in class and teachers really making some nasty comments about like, that's not, how, that's not the right color of a tree. Trees are not purple,
Yeah, we're starting a new project. It's called the No to Yes campaign, and it's really addressing those art wounds that we all have on some level. And it was when you were judged and you said you were wrong, or some authority figure said, yeah, that's not art. You know what I mean? We've all had those experiences. But what I also, what's coming up for me too, is like, I think in the beginning of it, you said, we're in denial. Lauren, you said denial, like you're denying your emotions, but you're also denying the world your gifts, and we talked about that, like who you really are. Like we're all so unique. And so through making art, you're really showing the world, hey, here I am. I guess it's the artist living out loud. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's really true. And I think like that's a great way to start letting the light shine. You don't have to put it out there in a big way. Right. And that is like starting small, meeting yourself right where you are. Because that, like, it's so funny because we do start big, right? We go, oh my God, I'm going to be like in galleries and, everyone's going to work. And you're like, oh.
Yeah.
But I think if you could just like start with making it fun for yourself, like what would be fun for you? And how do you feel about having it be fun?
Right. That's even a great question, because like, are people even allowing themselves to have fun in adulthood anymore? I mean, great question. And
that's a good one.
that's
like
like
they call it, it's now it's called adulting. I
right.
feel like I'm not adulting. I don't know. I don't know what adulting is really. So.
All right. So let's sum it up for folks. This is what I feel like it is. Okay. So in order to help this hurting world, right, what can creativity do to bring more peace and joy? What I'm hearing is that you got to start within. You got to start with yourself, because if you're not having peace and joy within, then you're definitely not going to be able to create that viral message of peace and joy. And I love the idea of like meeting yourself where you are, and asking yourself what would be fun, would be fun. So just peeling back all those layers. And if we're talking about taking an art break, which obviously we would be big advocates for you doing, honestly, for us, it could be just about anything. You could just walk outside right now and close your eyes and look towards the sky and listen to the next 5 sounds you hear and make about it. That would be an art break, so yeah.
Playing like to that end, like going outside and playing with the clouds, what shapes do you see? Can you make them move? Can you make them dance? As they're breaking apart? Am I doing that? Are they just breaking apart? So it's like getting back into the a little bit of magical thinking too, because we do like, when we go into like, all of the things about like quantum physics and manifesting and energy and all that kind of stuff. And, we do affect the world around us just by our thoughts.
I know. Yeah.
And there's plenty of experiments that they've done to like prove that, So what if it wasn't about paper, it was like real life sculpting. You go out and you think about stuff, or or interact with stuff with your thoughts and make pretend, with the clouds or the trees or the birds, like what would that be like?
I love that.
I
Oh,
love that. I
man.
love it. I like, you said life sculpting.
I did, didn't I?
You did it.
You
Just
did.
made that up. See what you
Credit.
get to do as an artist. You get to make things up.
I know. That's what
No rules.
yeah, there are, and I just think, yeah, wow, what a great conversation, because I could like talk about this. I just feel like this is a really deep conversation. I could just keep going and going and going. And I just, I keep coming back to the fact that, that it's for everyone could figure it out. You could find it. You could find that art break that would work for you in order to find that peace and joy, and then you would sculpt that right throughout your life, and that would be such a beautiful thing to do. So everybody just jump on this train, man.
Yeah,
I know I'm gonna reiterate, but I love, like, if you walk out the door and you're gonna say, I'm gonna find peace, I'm gonna find love. That's what you're searching for in the environment, and then think how good life would be.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, it's so interesting because everything that you can find out there, that you can find love in, that you can find peace in, that exists in here too.
Right.
So if you can't come here, you just can't do it for whatever the reason, go out there, but bring it back here.
Right.
Because it has to start here, so however, like, there's no wrong way to do it. There's no right way to do it. There's just your way to do it. And you just have to find your way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's imperative. You have to find it.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much.
It's fun. Very fun.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Right.
Thank you.